the more successful you are, the harder it is, for sure. There's less and less people who'll understand, and your employees, your employees believe and want to believe that you've, not that you're like infallible, but you've got a plan, you've got things figured out, and that they're safe and secure, and that there is a future for them at your company.
The Business Owner's Journey. I'm Nick Berry, and I've got real business owners telling their real stories, sharing their real lessons and strategies, so you don't have to figure it all out on your own. Kiri Masters is my guest on this episode, Kiri Masters.com. And Kiri is a marketing agency founder who recently exited in the last couple of years. And she's an award-winning writer. She was an expert in the online retail field, has written a couple of books. Now she is hosting her own podcast and has gotten into personal brand coaching, which is actually how I kind of fell into a conversation with her that evolved into her coaching me on some personal branding. And she's sharp. I knew she had to be here. She made an immediate impression on me. You're not going to get put one over on her. You can see the wheels turning. And she asked me tough questions and kind of made me answer them, like held me to account. So I knew she would be an amazing guest. She has a ton to share. This turned into 2 episodes. The first episode is we're going to talk about her story and bobsled marketing, her agency. And then the second episode, we spend time talking more specifically about the personal branding and the mistakes that business owners tend to make and how she guides them on that. So this is an awesome episode. Hope you enjoy it. Our listeners are going to get a 2-for-1 today because I've got a guest, Kiri Masters, who is going to cover 2 topics for us. So first is going to be the story of bobsled marketing, her company that she built and sold. And then the second, she's going to share her expertise on personal branding. From my conversations with Kiri, she's pretty adept at personal branding, and I'm going to have her try to speak to that for those of us who are not. You made a very good impression on me. You're the kind of person, every time we've had a conversation, it's like there's something enlightening about it, right? It's just the kind of conversation that I think I've told you this, it's good for your mind. First thing I want to do is I want to start the story of bobsled marketing. And I'm going to kind of turn it over to you and let you run us through the timeline. And I'll probably stop and ask you some questions along the way. But before you start there, I want to ask you one thing. Would you do it all over again?
Yes. We'll kind of get into it with the story a little bit. But when I started bobsled, I was 27 years old. And then when I sold that company, I guess I was, 34. So I think I was just talking with my husband about this yesterday. Like, I think it's great to become an entrepreneur at any stage of life. And statistically, we hear about the Mark Zuckerbergs, the 18-year-olds starting huge companies, right? But statistically, like, there are more entrepreneurs that are 45, and you're more successful if you're like just statistically more successful as an entrepreneur when you're older. But for me personally, having that experience relatively early in life has sort of set me up pretty well. And although it was challenging, I'm really glad that I did it at that point in time because I had a lot of energy. I didn't have anything to lose. Like, I didn't have any assets. I didn't have any, like, I had, the beginnings of a career, I guess, in banking. But I just, like, if it all fell apart and nothing came of it, it wouldn't have been the worst thing. I think that freedom is something that you might miss out as an older entrepreneur, even though you would have much, much more in terms of Rolodex skill sets, managerial capabilities, life experience, industry experience. You sort of make up that gap in all of those things. But I'm still glad that I did it while I was young.
Yeah. So was it your first business?
No, I started an e-commerce business a couple of years prior to that in 2012, which was this very niche e-commerce business in the arts and crafts supplies category. Basically, it was supplies for you to make your own lamps and lampshades. So very, very niche. I was into crafting at that point in time myself, and I had tried a little bit of making some lighting, and the materials were sort of hard to source. So I decided to set up an online store and sell this stuff myself. So that was where I had actually dabbled a little bit in e-commerce myself, and eventually started selling those products on Amazon. And so when it came time for me to sort of drop out of my banking job, which I wasn't really enjoying at the time, I had this skill set around Amazon, which was at the time fairly rare, I guess. And so I was able to take that skill set and sell it as a consultant to brands that were a bit more established and trying to figure the Amazon ecosystem out this is in 2015.
Okay. And so then went to bobsled.
That's right. Yeah. So bobsled was officially the second company, and quickly sort of began to show much more promise than the lamp making suppliers store.
Okay. Well, let's hear the story.
So I had that was the beginning of bobsled. I was really burnt out from my corporate job. I started out in banking. With the beginnings of my lamp making supplies store, I had a glimmer that I might want to be an entrepreneur, and I was starting to, so I chose to move into a different job at the bank. It was JP Morgan Chase in New York, and try and pick a job that would allow me to engage more with small businesses and learn more about what it's like to run a small business. So actually becoming a sales, a business banker, more of a salesperson in the bank, was a really good idea, because I got to do all this training around financial statements and what a healthy cash flowing business looked like, and what it meant, what we would look for at the bank in terms of cash flow to service debt and things like that. And that was something that was really unfamiliar to me prior to that. But I really didn't like that job. I really sort of felt like a cog in the machine in that position, and so I was pretty eager to get out quickly, and that's why I turned to consulting. Unlike an e-commerce business, obviously you can just make money upfront from a consulting engagement, versus e-commerce, which is you have to build the whole airplane before you start flying, right? You have to sink a lot of money into inventory and infrastructure and all of that before you get any dollars back. And typically you get dollars back and then you have to put it right back into more products. And so it doesn't cash flow very easily, especially in the beginning. So that was the beginning of bobsled. It was a very rocky start, though. That first year, I told someone this the other day. They didn't believe me. In that first year, bobsled made $36,000, and that was my we were living in New York. This was me and my husband. He decided to quit his job and join me as well, towards the end of that year as well. So we were just living off of fumes in that first year, but it did just kind of seem to hold some promise. It was very exciting. We had a lot of fun working together, and just we're two 27-year-olds. We'll just figure, if this doesn't work, we'll just figure it out.
That's so awesome. So he saw beyond the $36,000 pot of gold.
Yeah,
he saw the promise.
Yeah, well, that was for the full financial year. So things sort of started to pick up a little bit more towards the end of the year, especially once we were both working on it. But it's amazing how you get used to living on a lot more, and that seems like an inconceivable amount of money. But at the time it was all right. We figured it out.
You said it when you started. You were 27, and you had, you didn't have a lot to lose. You're in a position where you could afford to step out there and do that.
Yeah,
and that's what it allows you to do, right? You can get by on 36,000 or however many. I mean, that's a chapter in a lot of people's stories, thankfully, right? That's because otherwise, there are a lot of us who would never be able to go beyond that. That would be the end. Not enough staying power.
Yeah. People have it rightly, especially once you have kids and a mortgage and things like that. If you have a side hustle, they're looking to fully replace their income with their side hustle before they make the leap. And I didn't feel that was necessary for me. I just took that leap right away. It's all very circumstantial and very dependent on your own capacity for risk as well.
You mentioned, I think you used the phrase like it showed promise, right?
Yeah.
This bobsled showed promise. So what were the signs? What did you see? When did the light bulb come on for you that this is going to be a thing? We need to fan the flames.
I'm not sure there was one specific moment that I felt really comfortable that it was all going to work out. We had, in order to get some momentum with clients, we actually hired a lead gen agency who ran this lead gen campaign, reaching out to brands who had been reached their funding goal on Kickstarter and had raised more than, I think it was more than 75 grand or something. And so this lead gen agency would reach out to them and say, hey, we saw that you raised this much money. Congratulations. We are a contingency based agency that works with brands like yours to get started on Amazon. We take whatever it was, 15% or something of your sales, which for those clients was a great deal because it was 100% risk free for them. And the issue for us was they didn't always pay us, or it was just not after all the fees and everything, we were just not really a priority to get paid. They wouldn't necessarily always have the inventory available to make good use of the sales momentum that we would work really hard to build. So it was not a business model I would pursue again, but it did help to show us oh, this is a valuable service. People are willing to pay for this. And we just needed to get some more runs on the board in terms of the experience that we had and the clients that we worked with in terms of getting a foundation set. That was really helpful.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So then kind of map it out for me from there to, I believe you said 60 employees, a staff of 60 when you sold, and somewhere in multiple seven figures in revenue.
Yeah. So from that, 7 years later, I sold. So that first year, 2015, it was me and my husband, and we had one part-time employee. And then by the time we sold, we had 60 employees, and around about 100 clients at that point.
Okay. So how do you get there?
So what I discovered that worked for me and how we came to know each other as well, Nick, was I didn't have, back in 2015, I had no money, had no credibility, I had no Rolodex, I had fairly minimal experience in the service I was selling, frankly. I had done it with my own business for a couple of years. It was still pretty small. So I had no business getting into this whole game. But back then there were not a whole lot of super credible other options either. It was still very much early days in that ecosystem of Amazon agencies, Amazon consultants. They were out there, but there weren't very many of us. So the direction that I took was to lean really heavily into content marketing and building a brand of expertise in this sort of nascent area. So blogging is free. Making YouTube videos is free. Making online courses is free. And I had time and no money. So that's what I did. And so I had during my LAMP era, I had also done a lot of content marketing there. I'd make film tutorials and put them on YouTube. And still my most like the biggest like YouTube video I've ever made is one of my lamp making tutorials. It's got like 300,000 views or something like that. Yeah. I'm
in my research, I did not find that.
So I was like, I had some I had some experience with content creation from my previous business, which it's interesting seeing that thread, like connecting those dots now. But that really, really helped, because when people were searching for how to create an inbound shipment to Amazon on Seller Central, like my content would show up. What's the difference between Amazon Seller Central and Amazon Vendor Central? My content would show up. And so we started to get, like, once these Kickstarter clients worked their way through, and some of them paid us, some of them didn't. Once we were actually able to start generating inbound leads pretty quickly, by like within 12 months really of making a concerted effort there, which at the time felt like forever. But I didn't have anything else to do. I would do all these sales calls, speak with clients, and understand, like, try and find out what are their questions, what do they struggle with, what are their misconceptions, like what are they just wrong about? I mean, we when you're an expert, you know that people have misinformed ideas about something, and so like digging into that, commentary about changes, like Amazon would roll out some new program or a fee change or something like that, just jump on that right away. What does this mean? What does it mean for you? Is it good or bad? So that really was the whole engine of Bobsled from 2015 right through to when we sold it. And it meant when it came time to sell and find an acquirer, it's really funny. All of the potential acquirers I spoke with in 2021 all thought we were way bigger than we were. Like they would get to the point where we showed the financials and like, really? I thought you guys were so much bigger. Like, you just seemed like a much bigger company because we had such a big reputation in the space, but we were sort of punching above our weight.
Mm-hmm. My next question is why did you sell? How did you know it was time? But I don't want to jump to the last chapter of that story if it's not time. Is there a lesson or something, from that timeline that we would be skipping over?
I think it's interesting what I'm working on now. One of the projects I'm working on now is a podcast called Obsession, and it's about people who get to the top of their game, whether that is as an author or as a video game designer, like studying sort of people's lives who made it to the top. And there's two commonalities with everyone. One is being in the right place at the right time, and two is obsession. So being in the right place at the right time, you don't always know it. Like, I was in the right place at the right time in 2015, having a nascent skill set in the Amazon ecosystem turned out to be, that was like a rocket ship. And even today, the skills are still, like, relative to the need for them, still quite scarce. So I got in early and demonstrated some expertise, and that just ended up being, looking back, a very fortunate time and place to get started with that particular skill set. And then obsession is an unreasonable dedication to executing on something or becoming really good at a skill or an industry. I studied Mr. Beast, the YouTube, the biggest YouTuber in the world, and that guy is like, he's still in his 20s, but he lives and breathes making videos. Like, he just does not stop making videos, and he's been doing it since he was like 11.
And he doesn't spend time thinking about anything else, right?
No, he doesn't have any friends. He doesn't have a normal life. This guy is unreasonably obsessed with that. And that's true for pretty much everyone who gets to the top of their game. Now, I was like committed to getting really good at this thing. I wanted to build a business. I became really interested in the practice of running and operating a business. I got into EOS, which we've talked about. I joined EO. I really liked talking about business and marketing, and it became a big part of my identity. But I also never got to the unreasonable obsession point. Like I always put a pretty good line there in terms of work-life balance, and I didn't let the company get in the way of me living a pretty balanced and healthy life. Like there would be tough times, but I wasn't like flying around all the time, meeting with clients. I wasn't typically working on the weekends. I had a pretty chill work life. So I think that if I had been a bit more obsessed and worked harder, it could have been a bigger company, and maybe I could have made a little bit more money on the exit. But that was a choice that I made. And in my last year that I was working at, in 2019, I was only working 4 days a week. I would take Fridays off, and we were living in South America. I was going and learning Spanish, and I'd go for a hike, and I would work a 4-day week. So those are decisions that you can make as well. At the time that I was going through the exit process, I would get that question, well, why is bobsled not bigger? Like, you seem to have a good position in the market and a good team in place, and like all of the things that should make for a bigger business at this stage. And I just think that it was because I prioritized like my own health and well-being more than a lot of other founders do.
Did that come naturally to you, or did you kind of hit a boundary early on and find out the hard way that you needed to focus on it? How did you do that? Because that's unusual.
Yeah. I can't think of a single moment. I had a baby in 2017, and that was that forces you to step back in many ways. And I guess I just wasn't really prepared to return to the grind.
Were you pretty balanced before the baby came?
No, but it was fun then. Like, I mean, this is looking back with rose-tinted glasses, of course, but like on a Friday night, it would be, me and my husband would just be working. I'd like maybe go and get a bottle of wine or something, and we would just like work all night on Friday, and it was fun. We would just, it's not like we didn't have anything better to do, but it was just like it was so high energy and exciting that I just wanted to do it all the time. And then baby comes along, you're like, oh, maybe there's something else to life here than just grinding. So I'd say that probably would be the catalyst.
Yeah, babies definitely change things. You mentioned EOS and EO. Can you like plot those on the timeline for me? Like, at what point did you use those two particular resources, and like what effect did that have? What was your experience, and are there any others that you have experience with that you kind of put in that same group of like, these were some of the things that, but for me, EOS, we used it for a little while. It's one of a handful of things that changed everything about the way that I saw my business. Right. Yeah. So that's kind of that group of resources that I'm talking about.
Yeah. So there was a few things. One, when I first started, I was in this really great online community called the Dynamite Circle. And it's still around today. I haven't been a member for a few years, but it is this wonderful community of people who run generally just online location independent businesses, which back in 2012, 2013, 14, 15 was still like kind of unusual. But these are all different types of businesses, agencies and e-commerce and things like that. And so there was a really great like part of that community in New York, and I would go to some events that they had, and there was just this really strong sense of community there, because having an online business was still a little unusual. And so we all kind of like really found kindred spirits in each other. And that was awesome. And I think that there's lots of these communities out there. EO is another one. It's sort of like a more grown-up version of the Dynamite Circle, I guess.
Okay.
But there are lots of communities out there, and if you can find one that fits your vibe or stage of business, that is really life-changing, because it is incredibly lonely. And once you start building a team, you realize, oh, these people cannot be my friends, and they cannot be my confidants in the business. I need someone to talk with who really understands what I'm going through. And you have crises of confidence where you really don't feel like you've got it in you to do this. And then there are also moments of incredible exhilaration and excitement, and you have some kind of win, and no one else will understand except another entrepreneur. So you need people to be able to text and share in that journey with you. And I'm still texting and calling and visiting with these friends that I made back in 2013, 2015 today. So yeah, I've been a member of a couple of different communities there. The EOS was helpful. I did like many people self-implement based on the book traction initially, and that was a really good experience. It sort of clarified a number of things I sort of instinctively knew, like the integrator and visionary relationship, and how important that is for there to be a clear visionary and an integrator. That was something that was already in place, and understanding that framework, it's like, oh, okay, actually we got that nailed kind of by accident. But it's still, I'm so glad I don't have to think about like formalizing that now.
Yeah, then you can really buy into it, right?
Yeah.
You got the information you needed, you can go.
Yeah, and there's some things you realize, you're like, oh, actually, we're doing that pretty well. And it's that's just as good a win as realizing, oh no, we were doing that all wrong, and here's the better way of doing it. You can sort of have an instinct for some of these things, and then help with the rest. So a system like that is great as well. But I would say I'd put the community first, because it's as much a mental and emotional game as a game of systems.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree. As it relates to the community, I think you have to curate your support system as you go. And, I think everybody needs a coach. I think you need to be you need to have a small group of people who are maybe peers, but that know your business well enough that you can talk to them about, maybe some more of the nuts and bolts type things, and they'll understand, and they can even push back.
Yeah.
And you need to be, also be a part of a bigger, broader community. Sometimes it's just to make sure that there's somebody around that can pick you up and dust you off and say, like, it's going to be fine. Like, everybody goes through it. But you're right, it is lonely. And as you go, there are just going to be fewer and fewer people who can relate to the things that keep you up at night.
Right. Yes, totally. I think the more successful you are, the harder it is, for sure. There's less and less people who'll understand, and your employees, your employees believe and want to believe that not that you're like infallible, but you've got a plan, you've got things figured out, and that they're safe and secure, and that there is a future for them at your company. So you can't let that there is an amount of vulnerability that's helpful to have with your team, so they know that you're a real human, and it's a team effort, and you need their help. But yeah, there's not, you can't just unload on people about all of your insecurities all the time.
Right. It's not their responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you may need help. It's not their responsibility to be that type of help. Okay. So then now kind of jumping to the last chapter with bobsled, what made you decide it's time? How did that all come together?
It was a real process to finally decide it was time to sell. I had thought of it for a long time. Because of the space I was in was pretty hot for a number of years. I would have people reaching out, asking about a potential acquisition fairly frequently. So I would entertain some of those calls and try that idea on and walk back from it, and like, no, I'm not ready to sell. I should really try and get this company bigger and have a bit more of an exciting exit. And I sort of flip-flopped on this for, I want to say, like at least a year, maybe even a year and a half before I actually decided, no, I'm going to do this. What kind of got me to make that final decision and push ahead was playing out my options. I just couldn't see it being a viable option for me to continue to own and operate the company myself. I was just kind of burnt out of it, to be honest. Like it not because I was burning the candle at both ends at that point, but the fun had gone for me. I mean, it was working, but the problems that we had just tended to be the same. They were, either problems with employees or problems with clients, or just kind of felt a little bit stuck. And so my exit options were go and hire a CEO, which at the stage that I was at would have been difficult to find someone really good that would have it be exciting, or maybe not even that. Just I knew it would be difficult to hire a CEO, and not necessarily like the first one would hit. Like I might need to redo that process a number of times and still stay involved and sort of watch what they're doing and make sure that they're the right person for the job, or actually sell the company. So I didn't really like option A because I knew I'd have to stay involved somehow. And so I went ahead with option B and hired an M&A advisor who knew my space really well, who was specifically a agency M&A broker. I'd worked with on the buy side of marketing agencies for a long time, and then set up shop on the sell side. So really understood my industry very, very well. And we got moving. This was in the middle of 2021 when I hired them and we got started.
Did you have an advisor, or like who was in your corner when you were going through the thought process?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So I had a fractional CFO who I'd been working with for maybe two years at that point, 2 or 3 years. Foresight CFO is the name of the company. And so I had a fractional CFO that I'd been working with there, and was certainly helped with the CFO side of things, but was more like a coach to me in terms of thinking about this kind of stuff. And he and I had spoken off and on about selling for a long time at that point. And so when things got serious, that was very helpful because I'd already been exploring that option with John for a while. Yeah. And then I had my accountant who I'd been working with since the beginning of my company, who was also very well versed in M&A at that point as well. But I didn't have a lawyer. I had to go find the lawyer and M&A advisor out the gate, get that figured out before I got started.
Was your husband still in the business when you sold?
once I decided that once I decided I was definitely going to sell, I said, look, I don't think you're going to like working for someone else. You should leave the company. And just to give a little context, like we had a conversation very early on when he joined. It's like, okay, so you want to join me here, but like in what capacity? Do you want to be a partner, or do you not want to be a partner, and do you want to just kind of be an employee? And he didn't want to be a partner. He just wanted to be on the ride, but that I was the boss and I was going to make the calls. And it was so wonderful. Speaking of like who was on my team, he was like the number one on my team, because he didn't have like the most important role in the company, but he knew enough of what was going on and the characters involved. And so he was always a great sounding board to listen to issues or brainstorm ideas and things like that. And I wouldn't always agree with what he said, but if I decided to go in a different direction, he'd say, well, it's your choice. That's your call. So it was a really good, I hear from a lot of people, I could never work with my spouse. And if you think that, it's probably true. And that doesn't mean that you don't have a great relationship and a great marriage, but I don't think everyone is really suited to work together. And I don't think everyone would be able to like make those plays like my husband did, to say, here's what I think, but you're the boss, it's your call, and I'm going to support you.
Did you know that I work with my wife? We're business partners and work together every day. Yeah. So, and I think before you, I've not met anyone else who talks about it the way that we do.
Wow. Amazing.
Congratulations.
Same to you.
But I think the conversation that you had with him, the role clarity conversation, like it doesn't go the way that you talk about it going with him being in the company by accident. Right. It went that way because you were willing to have those conversations and be honest and push back if you disagreed, and like that was built on something. And even working with your spouse aside, that role clarity conversation, that's one of those things that I took from EOS. It kind of gave me the method for like, okay, I need to get really clear on these things about this place on the org chart here. So now I know we can get clear on our expectations.
Yeah.
And so, that's that framework coming into play there, and the stakes are the highest when you're trying to apply that with a spouse.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the tools I love in EOS the most, is that accountability chart.
Before that, for me, it was like, I have an idea of what we're trying to do here, but I needed some way to organize this. And so, that's a lot of the resources that I feel like played a big part in my journey were like that. That's what they did for me, was they gave me a label or a framework or a methodology, a box to put something in. That's just what happened to be most valuable for me, or what I needed. What are you taking away from the entire experience with bobsled that you either want to make sure that you do next time or don't do next time?
So working with that M&A advisor, like I'd paid them a lot of money, but it was 100% worth it in terms of the moral support, the fact that this is something that they've each spent like 30 years of their career doing, and I've never done it before. That expertise is definitely worth something. So moral support, just knowing how things work, being a buffer between you and the buyer as well, like letting someone else be the bad guy, because they were definitely the bad guy. Like this company I sold to said, we did not like your banker. I'm like, well, I don't care. Like he was working for me. I'm the one who paid him. I don't care if you liked him or not. But like he was the bad guy, so that when I joined the company and I've got to go work for the CEO of the company that just acquired me, he's not resentful. He doesn't like my old broker. They had all these arguments, but like I don't have any stain on me,
Yeah, you're one of the good guys now.
I'm the good guy. So anyway, like it was so worth it to work with a M&A advisor, and they were great. I'm still in touch with them. If anyone is in the marketing agency space, I can certainly like connect them. But that was really, really important. And then, like everyone says, it takes longer than you think it's going to take. And sure enough, took about 8 months from beginning to end. And like, yeah, it was a big journey. I just wrote a blog post actually that's kind of like childbirth. You have this instant amnesia about how difficult and painful it was. You think it's gonna like just be so you have the birth plan. Of course, nothing ever goes to plan. It takes longer. It's more painful and bloody than like you could have ever imagined. But eventually, it's over, and you got to go tell your employees and the clients, and things move along. And yeah, I will say it was beyond the usual amount of paperwork that you have to deal with to sell your company. I also had at that point moved back to Australia, because this is during like just around COVID era. We'd moved back to Australia, so I also had to plan to move back to the States to go work for this new company and deal with like an international move in the midst of all that as well. So there was a lot going on in terms of paperwork and stress, and like starting a job working for someone else and navigating what that's like, and that huge change of identity that comes with going from being a business owner with the weight of the world on your shoulders, but also ultimate freedom and responsibility of how you spend your time and what you end up working on, to like having a job and having a boss and having milestones to hit. So that was, the next stage of the process was, okay, you've done the deal, but it's not over unless you're one of the very, very few people that gets an all cash deal. Like typically there is a next stage required, and another like sprint ahead of you. Once you think you finished the marathon, you got to do the swimming leg of the triathlon.
Mm-hmm. And as an entrepreneur, now you have to be redomesticated for a little while.
Redomesticated. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So how did that go?
Yeah, mixed. So like I had a wonderful boss, and the company that I sold to was really great and did everything they said they would. So really no complaints there. That was all wonderful. The turmoil that I faced was all inner turmoil, and it was related to a change of identity, getting through something that was so like, look, at the time during the exit process, during the M&A process, it was just one day at a time. Just put one foot in front of another. They need this, they need that. This has come up. What are you going to do about that? And just like, and then, so it was, I couldn't really think about anything else. It was all consuming, really. Just get the thing done. Then when it was done, tell everyone, start the process of visa and moving back to the States. And like it was like a year where it was all about the deal or all about the move. And then, July, August of 2022, most of the things on the to-do list were done. And I was like, oh, who am I? And what am I? Yeah, it was, I finally had some time to like myself, and it was nice, like not having to work until midnight every night, being on a different time zone and everything. But suddenly I had some time and space, and I was like, I was really confronted with darkness. And this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs face when they sell their company. And there's, I wish I could pull this research up, but I found a research study of people who'd exited their companies, and like it was like something crazy, like 7 or 8 out of 10 people who exited their businesses suffer from clinical depression.
I would believe that.
So that's what, I eventually came to realize that I was depressed, and I started going to a psychiatrist and therapy for that, and on my mental health journey from there. But it was very confronting. I felt very guilty that I had everything I could want out of life. I had a great family, a great marriage, I had money in the bank, I had a great job. What the hell? You don't deserve to be depressed. You've got everything.
Yeah.
And I also had a lot of judgment about depression as well. Like, you're lazy, you're on the couch all day, you can't get up and do anything. You're lazy, you don't deserve it. So I had my own judgment about what that mental health challenge looked like, and I didn't like that. I had a lot of judgment towards myself about it.
Yeah. Wow. So you just kind of figured out on your own that, this is what I'm going through. I need to talk to somebody. Is there something that you could you could have been told, or that you could tell other entrepreneurs who might come upon that situation? Like, what do you need to look for? How do you keep somebody from having to find out that that's what they're dealing with the hard way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it became pretty obvious to me over time that was the issue. It would sort of come and go, which made it difficult, because I would have some bad days and then I'd feel all right. I'm like, oh, that was weird the other day. I don't know what it was. Maybe I didn't sleep well or something. I'd shake it off, and then we'd come back, and just kept it was just kind of cyclical. So I would say that to be aware of how prevalent it is, and maybe after the interview today, Nick, I'll find that research and send it to you so you can put it in the show notes. But it is very profound, the percentage of people who struggle with this, and to be aware of it, and to make your loved ones aware of it as well. That
if there's anything you can do to be proactive, right?
Yeah, like if you maybe I'm not the one that notices it first, but just to share with your loved ones that, hey, it sounds strange because I've just had this like otherwise amazing event, but like a lot of people in my position do actually end up getting depressed. So just like, have someone else looking out for you as well, because you may not even be the one to notice it first.
Yeah, definitely. We'll for sure include that information in the show notes. So what has your fire rekindled?
So I worked for the acquirer for a couple of years after the transaction, and once my obligations were finished there, I decided I wanted to leave. I have been in this space for 9 years now, and never say never, but I just got kind of sick of talking about the same things. It's an exciting industry. I went to a conference a few months ago just before I left, and it's an exciting industry. I think that there's a lot going on. Never say never about going back to it, but I felt kind of burnt out. I really wanted to have a break. So what I've been getting up to since I've left is doing a little bit of coaching and mentoring, specifically in the personal branding and thought leadership space, as we talked about. I started a new podcast as well called Obsession, which is not an interview podcast, but it is exploring the origin stories of people who made it to the top of their game in commerce and culture, and what sort of, what were the attributes that got them there? What are the habits, things like obsession, and being in the right time and place as well. And just sort of like going back and documenting my journey, I really learned a lot from people who'd come before me and shared what it was like to sell their company and what it was like when they first started their company, and listening to podcasts and audiobooks and things like that about how other founders had made their way. And so I kind of feel like I'm in this point of time now where I can be a little reflective and go back and try and like document that story for my own benefit of like just processing it myself, as well as other people who are just starting out or just going into that exit transition process and want to understand what it was like from someone else. So I'm just sort of writing all that stuff down in a personal Substack as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've enjoyed reading the Substack. I've learned, a lot more about you, and that's kind of sparked. Those are things that have come up in our conversations. And I think the podcast, as I got into it and started to understand more about what it is very interesting to me. More interesting than I think you let on, because it's like, what makes these people who get to the top tick? And for somebody who thinks about, well, how do I want to be? How do you need to be to perform at that level? That's a window that you like to look into.
Yeah.
And see, how are what's their style? How are they doing it? What's behind it? It gives you something to maybe use as a base. But I think the Obsession podcast is very cool. I've seen a few episodes of that. I would like to have you talk a little bit share some of your expertise on personal branding. This is actually how I got to know Kiri. Is I reached out to her for some input, and we've had a couple of conversations, and she's had to kind of slap me around a little bit about maybe some of the beliefs that I have about personal branding. I'm not sure if I'm representative of most people, but I think that me getting in my own way is probably something that it happens to other business owners. Tell us, what do we do wrong and what should we be doing? Thank you so much for listening. If you found the show valuable, you can say thanks and show your support simply by taking a quick second to like, share, and comment on the show. You can also find more information about each of my guests, all of the resources from the show, and myself at nickberry.info/TBOJ.